Kum learning about Gemara today. Yom Tov Yud Beis Tammuz. Today's daf is Daf Chagim. We're up to the bottom of page Chod Beis Amud Beis. And the last thing we learned, we're talking about you have to keep a certain distance from a dovecot, so that you don't want this. By placing a ladder, this animal, we call a marten, will jump up and snatch the birds away. And we said that even though Rabbi Yossi generally holds each person's responsibility to take care of their own, and the victim has to take precautions and move his chicken perhaps away or a dovecot, but in this case, it's gita delay. And what exactly gita delay means is your arrows. According to Rashi, the definition is if it came directly from you or it came because of you. That is, it's indirectly, directly. Here's the Rashi in a few other places. The Rashi says there's no difference between the words grama or garmi. For example, if you burn somebody's contracts, that's called garmi. Rameir says you don't garmi. And but grama, generally we say that grama and garmi are two different things. Grama is much more remote, you're much more distant than garmi, where you're a direct cause. You burned the person's check, you burned the person's contract, but still you only a cause. You didn't burn anything of value. Because of that, you cannot collect. That's called garmi. That's there's no difference grama and garmi. The only difference is whether you did the damage directly or whether indirectly. Taisus over here learns that no. That grama here and other places, that grama and garmi are two different things altogether. The difference between garmi is a much stronger cause than grama is. What the definition of grama is, if it happens straight away or if it's delayed. It's also negated to Hilchos Shabbos. And what's the idea of grama? That you open the fridge, it happens straight away, or the motor starts maybe a few seconds later or later than that. That's the difference between if you gira the day, if you do it, it happens straight away. But then the case of the marten, even though you didn't do it, but because it's talking about a case where it's right on the ladder, it's happening straight away. It's a body hazeka, definitely going to happen straight away. That's also considered as if you did the hezek. One thing we learned yesterday, very important, is there's two parts of hezek. One is the monetary aspect, but there's also an iser involved. And we discussed at length what the base of that iser is, whether it's Mahatayim and Rabbanon and the Rameh over here, which is very important. Okay, back to the Gemara. So Rabbi Yosef Havli Ahu Ahanu Toli. Rabbi Yosef had these very young saplings, or these very young trees, small palm trees. These bloodletters came. The Yosef Tasai was on their property, but they're right underneath the branches. And they were letting blood. We came along these crows. They ate the blood, and then and then they flew up to the branches of this palm trees. And they caused a loss of the dates to Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef said, "Why don't you remove your kurkur from here? Remove your birds, because they make those kind of sounds. Stop doing the bloodletting right underneath my tree. Move away. They're only a cause." And Grama Mazikin, you don't have to pay any money. Even though there's no monetary, you're right, but it's still usher. Whether it's whether it's evil michshel, in other words, whether you take with evil literally as well, or just the way we normally learn this neighbor for a blind person, plus a stumbling block. Is that what the issue is, or is it like the Torah says, or is it like other says Rabban? So they've been doing this for such a long time. They have a chazakah. And we discussed yesterday, chazakah here, the big machlekes. According to the Rambam, these cheskes tashmishin are instantaneously. If you see somebody misbehaving and you don't say anything, that means you allow them to do it. According to many Rishonim, we're talking about 3-year chazakah, like we're going to learn the next period. 3 years went by and you're doing protest, it's all right. But there's a question whether you need a tiny with it or not. According to some Rishonim, even if I'd say, I didn't buy it from you, nothing, but you didn't say anything, which means you were meichel me. And others say, no, even though there's chazakah, you also need a tiny. You have to make a claim. Either you clearly said, I'm meichel you, or you gave me the rights, you sold me the rights. Anyway, there's a chazakah here. Why can't they continue? There's no chazakah when it comes to damage. And because I thought I can take care of it, I can't. I thought I can tolerate it, but I can't. So the fact that last year was all right, now I can't. The law of Ijma, didn't we learn it's only limited. When do we say there's no chazakah by nazikin? Only in limited cases where most people cannot tolerate it. For example, smoke. You smoke, and eventually you just couldn't take it anymore. Those days that actually takes to explain the toilet, that the toilet is above ground and a terrible stench and filth, and it looked terrible. Amalei said, granted, he said, yes, everyone knows Then Rabbi Yosef said the things a person can have is somebody who's has too much compassion, somebody who gets angry quickly, and somebody who is very fastidious. Somebody but an isness who's very fastidious and very sensitive to everything. And he says, "Cool, be. I got all three qualities." Yeah. So therefore, keep make a so for me, Danina Datoi, because that's who I am. Then keep kutra basically this to me, I can't tolerate even that. I remember we had Rosh Hashiva. They just walked into the base of Medrash. If he saw a little piece of paper on the floor, either he would run out or he would just start yelling. Couldn't tolerate dirt at all. So the big machlekes is showing here. When we say that you can change your mind by certain nezikin, is it's only in a case where you're meichel? So now it's like mechila b'tos. It was a mistake. I thought I could take it, but I can't. Or what about if you actually he paid for it? He paid for the rights. Can you also say kinyan b'tos? I changed my mind because I thought I can tolerate it, but I can't. Is a machlekes if you can, extricate yourself from a kinyan that you actually made. Now that we're continuing the same theme, you should distance the dovecot from a city 50 amas, because dovecot attracts birds, these pigeons. You should keep them a distance of 50 amas from the environs of the city. Otherwise, you will attract other private people's birds. And nor can you make it in your own property unless you have 50 amas on each side. Otherwise, you'll be attracting pigeons from your neighbor. Rabbi Yehuda says much greater than that. Base abo kurin mole shagar ayena. These doves, they fly a certain distance, so you have to have a distance of 4 kur. Each side 1 kur. A kur is 30 saw. A saw is 50 by 50 amas. A 30 saw is 1500 by 50 amas, which is 75,000 square amas area. Which is definitely a greater area than 50 amas and away from your neighbor. But if you bought from somebody else who already had a dovecot there, then I feel a tiny sliver of land must be that the previous person probably bought the rights from somebody to put it there, that people were meichel, and we're going to tine on your behalf. It's called tainina lelekech, even though you don't know what actually happened. The fact that you bought from somebody else, we're going to advocate on your behalf that you have the right to continue. You tell me that a bird only flies 450 amas, but I mean, we learned a person is really only we shouldn't place nets to catch these doves. You should be a much greater distance away. You should be at least 4 mil away from the city, not 50 amas, because that's how far they fly, and you'll be trapping private people's birds. I'm going to buy you a Meisha Chaita Tuva. Truth is, you're right. They fly greater distances. But talking about eating now, we're worried that the Kirsaya Bechamishim Amsa. We're saying over here is that they normally eat 50 amas malya. They fill up their stomach. The first 50 amas of their flight is after they take all their food because they feel it's close to their nest. As we'll see in tomorrow's morning, they always turn around and look where their nest is. And therefore, the 50 amas, they will eat the food, and then afterwards, but they fly. They might fly 30 and 4 meal. So therefore, they're not going to take away anybody's. No, one of the problems is that when you're very close to another neighbor, then the bird is going to fly outside of the birds will fly out of the dovecot, and they're going to eat from the other person's, tvua that's growing there, the crop or vegetable, whatever it is. But if you have 50 amas away, they won't eat. They fly much further, but they don't eat beyond 50 amas. So that's the main concern here. Not so much trapping in the case of dovecot, trapping the birds is that you are going to cause the birds, just like in the case of Yosef. The birds are eating from his palm. They're going to eat the tvua around them, but not beyond 50 amas. So if you're talking about flying, all they fly is for a meal. What time we learned? We learned that if you're in a settlement, you put even 100 meal, you shouldn't spread out. If the entire area is about one big area, one big city, you should not spread out your net because they fly very far, much further than 4 meal. If it's about flight, then why limit it into 4 meal? We're talking about over here that when they say that they fly 100 mil, if there's a bunch of vineyards and they jump from tree to tree to tree, they can go very far. Rava says, "B'yishuv sheichin." There are a bunch of dovecots on the way, so they can fly much further than 4 mil. But an open area, that's how far they fly from their original home, from their original habitat. If they're talking about this sheichin all the way, then the problem is the sheichin themselves. We're saying, why are you saying that 100 mil from the original place? Even forget about the birds from the original part of the city. you have shaykhim near here. So the shaykhim themselves, those birds will come and eat the two all around. So you shouldn't put any nets there. Don't put nets there, not because you're 100 mil away from the city and birds will fly you. You don't put, if according to Rava, there's dovecots all along the way, then you shouldn't put the net wherever it is because you're close. You're close up to a neighboring dovecot. That's why you can't do it. Nothing to do with it. We're not worried about the ones in the city. And for the Gemara, Iba Isema today, all those dovecots were his own. So there's no problem of trapping those birds. The problem is that the birds from far away, and Iba Isema the Kanani belong to Goy, so there's no gzeil in this case because the birds came on their own. Iba Isema the Hefker. Or you can say that these shochin are a hefker, so it belongs to nobody. So the Gemara Yehuda says, based about puppy from here now. The last part of the mission said that if you bought it, then you don't have no idea. We're going to advocate on your behalf. From here now, somebody buys something legitimately, and that person, the vendor, had the same modus operandi, and the vendor is no longer around to ask the vendor to prove that he had a right to do it. We're going to advocate on behalf of the buyer. Same thing is somebody's parents pass away and they'll leave behind a Yerusha. The same thing, we will advocate on their behalf. So the Gemara, what's a chiddush? Yoedish tanin will face a mishnah. Habam mishum Yerusha. If somebody comes and claims something because of a Yerusha, then it says there, ain't it sort of time, doesn't it time? Because the Bezdin is going to advocate on their behalf. You're right. The chiddush here is not so much the yoedish. The chiddush is that a buyer as well, when you buy from a vendor and the vendor is no longer around to ask and prove that he had a right to do whatever he was doing, we're going to advocate on their behalf. So, for example, if you bought a property legitimately and then somebody says, "Oh, but the property was stolen by the previous guy," if we're going to advocate on behalf and say that no, it wasn't, and you'll have to prove that it was. So the Gemara says, you bought a courtyard, you bought a courtyard, and it was protruding outside of the courtyard, it was protruding these beams into the street. Normally, you're not allowed to build straight into the street. Of course not. You're encroaching on public property. But if you bought a property that already had it in existence, you can continue. We'll advocate on behalf. But we're going to say that could be initially that was part of the private property when he built it. Then later, the guy was nice enough to let the public walk underneath the beams, or that he bought the rights from the Zion to the ear. We're going to advocate on their behalf. So what's the chiddush of our Mishnah here? Saying we still need the case in our Mishnah. Why? But yes, no new there. I'll say, what? Probably the guy when he built it was his own property, and then later on he allowed the people in the street to go walk on. And over time, people forgot that it was actually private property. Or maybe people they're designed to the ear. The council met and they agreed to let him gave him the right. But over here, nobody gave you the rights. And therefore we have to say, no, even here we'll advocate. Another can say, because you're individual, or here's one against one. We can say, well, if in our mission over here, if you bought and there was a rare dovecot there right next to somebody else's property, we'll say it must be that the other guy would have either you bought the rights, your predecessor bought the rights, or they were moichel. There's one against one. Our Rabbi, but Rabbi, who represented the public here that gave this person permission to build his? We would have thought that in this case we don't advocate that. It's a bit far fetched. They will tell you, in all instances we will tanin lekech or tanin leyosh. We just said before there's no chazaka by the zikim people. Let's say we allowed you to do something, we can always change our mind. We're talking about smoke. We're talking about the stench of a toilet, and therefore those things we said before, you can change your mind. Even though you're meichel, you can change your mind. So the machloek is if you bought it, well, you can change your mind. Next Mishnah. Nothing to do with this is what we're learning here, but because we're talking about birds, and we're talking about you have to keep a certain distance, and you shouldn't put a net, you shouldn't spread a net out, which is the Gemara and everything else. So we'll continue along the same thing. Nipple. You found a young little bird. The hanimtze b'teicha mishimama within 50 amma of a dovecot harehu shabal shebel. So it belongs to that shebel. Chutz b'chamishimama, if you found it outside of the 50 ammas, harehu shel mitzvah. Whoever found it can keep it because it came from abroad. It didn't come from this dovecot. Nimtze bein shnei shevches. If you found it right in between the two shevches, the criteria is where is it closer. Where do we learn out the concept of curve? That curve is an issue. That's somehow another an influencing factor. Is from Egla Arufa. Egla Arufa, we say you found a corpse. Whichever the city is, a neighboring city, that's the one that has to bring the Egla Arufa. So we see the concept of curve. That probability came from that city. Yeah, but but the point is that the idea that a curve is a factor. If it's half and half, then you divide it evenly. You sell it and you divide it. Very good. Remember. How can you forget? Yeah. I know when you're going to skip there. Rab Chanina, it's the Machlekes Gemara Rab Chanina and Rab. Rab will have tomorrow Chanina today. We have a couple of if we don't know what to do, we look at the circumstances. Everything has to be in context. So we have a concept called chazak. Chazak, and in chazak you have many different kinds of chazak. But the basic idea is we don't know what to do, leave it things at status quo. Yeah, chazak leave things the way they are. Then we have a concept called raiv. And Raiv is that probability. If most instances are so and so, then probably this is what happened. We have a rule from Rab in the third party Bava Basra and other places. When it comes to money matters, Raiv should not play a factor. Why? When there is a cheskes mammon. So there's a Raiv on one side, probability I'm right, but you have a cheskes mammon, the money is sitting by you. Raiv is not good enough, it's not strong enough to take out from the chazaka of mammon. Even though generally Reiv and Chazaka are Adif, but Cheskel Mammon, we say that Reiv cannot take out Cheskel Mammon. And now we have another factor called Karev. So we have a Machlekes of Chanina and Rav. Rav says between Reiv and Karev, Karev is the stronger one. Comes along Rabbi Chanina and says, no, Reiv the Karev. Reiv is stronger than Karev. The Avagav, the Ruba that Isaac, the both be limited. Roy we learn Achirabim Lahatis. Karev we learn from the Egla Rufa. Afilahachi Ruba Adif. Roy was strong. What's the possible logic in that? Because Karev Rave is a logical thing. It's called a beater. Rave is a beater that if probability, since in most cases this is how it is, then probably in your case, even though we don't know, probably it's the same thing. It's a beater. Karev and Chazaka are Gzeres HaKasim. Taylor said that's how it is. It's a din rather than a beater. That's when Taisha comes along and he introduces that in Karev itself, there are two levels of Karev. There's a Karev the Muchach and a Karev the Loy Muchach. There's a Karev like right in front of it. Then everyone says maybe we'll agree that it works. When is there Machlekes when it's a Karev the Loy Muchach? And the logic behind that is like this. A Karev the Loy Muchach, why do you say that it belongs to, it comes from there? It's Loy Muchach, it's pretty far away, is because compared to another one, it's closer. So it's not an intrinsic raya that it's from there. It's just if we're starting to compare it to other things, it makes more sense that it came from here. A Karev the Muchach is not because you're comparing it to other things. In itself, makes sense that it came from here. It's right in front of it. It's right in front of the doorway. It probably came from here. Not because you're comparing it to anything else. That's a stronger bidder. So maybe that Karev the Muchach, everyone will agree that Karev Muchach is a logical thing, but still the logic of Raiv is even stronger than that. But a Karev the Loy Muchach is there's very little logic to this, and those the other way around. So Rav will agree to in a Karev the Loy Muchach that the Raiv is stronger. In a Karev the Muchach is where there's a machlekes. Which logic or which beater is stronger, Karev Muchach or Raiv? Second, but further, I'll ask you a question from our first of all, Moshe Zayda said by the closest city. We don't say the city with a larger population. Why don't we just take a census and see how many people are in the city, and then we'll say, well, the low likelihood of murder came from that town. We don't say that. So we see what we see clearly that the Raiv and Karev take further, yeah. In the fishermen and other cities they have more people. And you want to be elected, you know what the Torah is talking about? That all the cities have exactly the same population. Amazing thing. Here suddenly we took a din in the Torah, an open-ended din in the Torah, and we completely limited to in such circumstances which is so rare. And interesting also, this is how Gemara works. The Sugla roof is in the end of a Saita, and yet right here in middle of Basa you have such an important halacha regarding Egla Rufa. That's why you have to go through the Hoshus. Otherwise you'll never get a full picture. So the Gemara the laser also but forget the next city. Okay, the next one has the same population. But there's a Raiv the Alma. The majority of people don't live in the city. So if you follow Raiv, then you go to say it's a friend. We don't know who it is. We don't know which city to go to. But let's just say it's instead of saying it's a local denizen, say it's some stranger from far away. So the Gemara be a Shevet ben Aharon. or further. We'll limit it further. This whole din talks about when you have to measure the cities that both cities have the same population and they're both surrounded by mountains, so the likelihood of foreigners coming here are very unlikely. Okay, so now let's learn on Mishnah. It says, you found this young bird in 15 amas. It belongs to who? It belongs to the owner of the dovecot. There might be other dovecots further away, but they have much larger, amounts of birds there. It's not even a factor here. There's no other dovecots that have more doves than him. So let me ask a question. If you found the bird outside of 50 amas, it belongs to the one who found it because probably it came from abroad. Now the you told me there's no other dovecots around, then we think came from. Obviously came from this one. What is 50 amas? Why would 50 amas have any bearing on this? Could have just as well asked, it came from the world because most doves don't live around here. Same question I had before. But anyway, I want to ask a better question. There's no dovecots, and we're obviously came from this one. So the Gemara, there are no dovecots that came from here. My skin and the matter though. We changed the shot around. We're talking about our bird. Our Mishnah about a young bird that can't really fly. It can only hop, and because it can only hop, it won't generally hop more than 50 amas. And that's why within 50 amas they say it came from this dovecot. Beyond that, it came from somewhere else, or somebody dropped it there, but didn't come from this one because birds who are hopping don't go that far. Any bird that hops doesn't go more than 50 amas. Boy, here comes the famous Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. The boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah, raglei achas betoichnun amma, v'raglei achas chutz mitchambishim amma. What's it then? Half and half. One part of the bird is within 50. It was because of this very reason. I've called Rabbi Yirmiyah throughout Rabbi Yirmiyah. And but the Bach points out over here that he was brought back into the base of Medrash at the end of Bava Basra. So he missed the whole Bava Basra from the Chav Gimel to the missed the whole Bava Basra, but they brought him back in. Now we had another Gemara. They said, "Don't make fun of the laws of Chacham." First of all, the Mishnah himself said, "Machsa shneim yachleiku." So what's Rav Yirmiyah's question? And why was he thrown out? The Mishnah, right in the last line of the Mishnah says, "Machsa," right in the middle, shneim yachleiku. Because the Mishnah is talking about the law of Karev, logic, where it comes from. Or what do we do? Over here, the Chachamim said a bird does not go beyond 50 amas. You're poking fun now by saying, one leg went beyond 50 amas. So maybe the Chachamim said 50 didn't mean exactly 50. Maybe that, and that's what bothered them. We had a few Gemaras in other places where they said, don't make fun of the Chachamim. The Chachamim say something, that's how it is. Exactly that. I mean, even one leg out of 50 amas, I'm talking about. It doesn't happen. Birds don't hop more than 50 amas. Not even one leg. So what are you asking such questions for? It's as if you're not taking the words of Chachamim seriously.
That's he was bothering them.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. What about this? But the Meforshim ask, how is that different than the question in the Mishnah? How is that different than the question in the Mishnah?
That's not the reason, because that's exactly what the Mishnah is talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, let's continue.
So then why did they throw it out?
Anyway, Rabbi Yirmiyah made fun of all the Bavloim anyways. Remember, you had Hani Bavloi Tipshayi and all that, and the dark place. First, we're coming here. Nimtza ben shnei shaykh with kodesh shaloi. You found it between. We found it between. It says the Mishnah between two dovecots, whichever is closer. That's what comes from. We don't. It doesn't come into the question here. Let's count how many doves are in this one and how many other pigeons are in this one, and work. We don't do that. Is it ayah karev is the only factor here? Nothing to do with rave. Kasher chanina. Exact same answer. Exactly the same. They counted exactly the same amount of birds. But later through the Alma, okay. So then let's say that it came from either of them. Maybe it came from abroad, and the majority of the birds, since Rave is the supersedes the Karev, then let's say it came from abroad and belongs to nobody. Similar to before, we're talking about that because of the Kramim, it travels a bit further, but because it's in a vineyard, it stays around. It stays around where it is. Why? Because the bird, when it's very young, always wants to be able to see a line of sight of its nest, of its original habitat. Otherwise, it doesn't want to go away. Not yet. Doesn't have the confidence to go beyond that. And if it came from abroad, there's no way that it'll be able to see its original nest because the vines will block it. So it must be from around here. The Masi, keeping the money since it's jumping around, the Masi also can't come. The whole even within 50, the whole midday, it will only happen if we turn around and see its nest. But if it doesn't see its nest, it won't jump there. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow the sugya of Roiv and Karv.
What's
Okay.
the discussion we showed with working Beitza? Because in the website,
Sorry?
in Beitza, there's a whole thing about dollars.
Yeah, about muktzah and the track. Yeah. Okay, have a good Yom Tov, Yubes Tammuz. Continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.
Yeah, thanks, bye.